2017 is not behind us just yet. We have a few more hours to go. And of course, this is a natural time to look back, take stock of the year that was. A highly politicized year, if you will. 2 elections in 1 year. I think that has made history, at least for Kenya and the world by and large. So joining us in studio right now are 2 individuals to give their expectations for 2018 and also take a look back on what 2017 meant for Kenya and for Kenyans as well. Joining me now is John Wesley Nguuh. He's a governance analyst, and Daisy Amdany, who is a political commentator. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's begin with looking at 2017. My goodness, quite an eventful one. When you're looking at the 2 elections that we had to go through, back to the Supreme Court 2 times, and then now here we are. And a lot of people wondering, is the political season really behind us? Has it really passed? But let me start with you, Mr. Nguuh, in terms of what do you think were some of the defining moments of 2017?
I think Kenya has decided to be defined by politics. You know, and when we look back, we realize that both the elections, when you look back, you realize we were just hyped about elections, the August 8th, the October 26th, and the in-between, the issues about the inauguration of the president and swearing in of the opposition leader. I mean, for me, I think that's what we have been revolving around, the power struggles in this nation. Who is going to rule Kenya, when, getting to the talk about secession, but all of them just around the governance issues about this country.
Yeah,
Yes.
and do you agree with that, Daisy, that we are indeed defined by politics, or is it just every election cycle we find ourselves going with the politicians?
First of all, I want to say that everything is actually defined by politics, because politics defines how our lives are going to be. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, you know, the politics. It's the toxic nature of the politics that we have in Kenya, and the huge disappointments that continue to meet us as Kenyans, and the failed expectations, you know, of the political process. Because as a democratic country, elections are a critical part of our democracy. But when that democracy doesn't deliver on the people's expectations, and we see blatant disregard for the rule of law, then it also tells us that how we are defining our governance structures. Because if people are going to criminally manipulate processes so that the will and the voice of the people is not manifested in outcomes, then you can be sure that is exactly how they are going to govern. And that, for me, is a big problem that has shown itself up in Kenya, and something that we seem to want to sweep away and not to have the difficult discussion, you know, about how then do we properly address our politics and elections so that we don't have the kind of difficulties, as we say, you know, people say it's been a difficult year, so that we don't have the kind of difficulties that we continually have every election cycle.
All right, Mr. Nguuh, maybe you could tell us, do you feel after all these events, you've said a lot of things, we've decided to be defined by politics. Has the country grown stronger or even more fragmented? Because they say that, you know, with growth comes a lot of stretches. They've used the analogy of pregnancy where you've got stretches and discomfort, but it births something good. So are we at a point where it's birthed something better, or are we at a point where we are more fragmented as a country?
I think, unfortunately, is the constitutional order that we have that has brought what I would call more disjoint. I mean, we are more disjointed, as it were, at this point. And I would say this because I was involved in the constitutional review, and I was in the know. I own up, I was in the know. I was not in the know because of some of the issues that, actually, it was very wrong for some people to purport that those who were in the know because they did not want a new constitution. That was wrong, because as for me, I was in the know. But I was in the know because I thought there were issues that we had not addressed, especially the kind of, now when it comes to the politics, the kind of governance structure we needed. Was it purely presidential or parliamentary? How would the sharing of power and resources be? And now all this talk we're having right now is about the sharing of power and resources. If that had been handled well, we'll not be getting even about secession. But even when you look at the secession element, you realize if whichever, I was actually talking to some of the friends on both sides, and I was just saying, look, even if we got the Kenya, you know, the Central Republic and the People's Republic, if you check on what is happening even in the political arena right now in Parliament, the sharing of the positions in the committees, and you would actually realize there would be fragmentation even in the Central Republic or the People's Republic, because you must have the right governance structures very well defined in the Constitution for you to move on. We are actually more divided.
All right. Daisy, do you think so? And especially considering that we still have unfinished business politically, as far as we hear the opposition speaking in regards to they still having plans to swear in Raila Odinga, does this mean that the fragmentation is going to deepen? Or does it mean that there's still a light at the end of the tunnel and it's not a train that's coming?
Well, I think, yes, we are fragmented. That everybody, I mean, we all know that. And I think, you know, there's a lot of talk about dialogue, let's sit down and talk, and that kind of thing. Now, how we manage the process moving forward will determine really whether, you know, we have an explosive situation or whether we're able to actually manage the transition that we're in. What is clear is that the process, the electoral process, was so unsatisfactory that it has the disaffection that has stemmed from that electoral process we have failed to address that. And one way or another, you can see the opposition, who of course feel the brunt of that, the way the process was handled. They are insisting that they want to push through with their agenda. And this is something that they are obviously going to do, which means that moving forward, and I can't really forecast what that means for us, because I don't think that we've really been in a situation quite like the one that we are in right now, because previously we had a more centralized, we had a centralized system. And so issues were being addressed, you know, at the national level. Now we have the devolved unit, we have the people's assemblies coming up. So we have a different kind of structure, which only time will tell how that will play out. But for me, what it needs is soberness on the part of Kenyans, because I think that we mustn't be content to continually sweep things under the carpet. Kenyans must really own up to some of the very difficult discussions that we must have as a country. Because you cannot talk about moving on as a country with so many issues that are not addressed. Because while we may talk about the politics, and we're very centered on that, and those are serious governance issues, we're looking at the education system. We have a crisis there. We have a multiplicity of crises that we are facing as a nation. We have the food security issue, food safety issues. We have an education crisis. We have a health crisis. We clearly have a transport crisis, a road safety crisis. So we have a multiplicity of issues, many of them which stem from maladministration of the state, bad governance, and us guys not actually addressing issues. So we can't continue to run away from these things. We can't PR them away. We must have these difficult discussions. And I think that the leadership that we need right now is a leadership that is sober enough to say that as Kenyans, there are so many issues that must be addressed. We must come together and speak as a nation and speak honestly about these issues. And it's not about the politics of people looking for positions, you know, because there's been talk of, coalition governments, Nusumkate. This is not what Kenyans are interested in. Kenyans are interested in having the issues addressed. What are we going to do with these 500,000 plus children who are not getting placement in universities? We have a new curriculum coming up. The teachers are opposed to it. The parents don't understand it. We're throwing our students into it. Many of us don't understand it. We have banned night travel. Are we going to ban day travel when accidents begin to happen during the day? You know, the way we approach the challenges that we have just breeds more complication in this country, and simply because Our leaders just don't want to sober up and talk about the challenges that are facing us. So as Kenyans, I think that we really need to look for a way to actually sit down and discuss our country as Kenyans, because we cannot continue to wait for crisis to meet us, because we are already, I think the festive season has given us a lull, you know, a reprieve from, you know, what is coming, because it will come. We cannot continue like this as a country. And I don't mean to sound like a prophet of doom, but the reality is that we have so many challenges that cannot be simply wished away by a good talk and, you know, saying that, you know, it's okay, let's put the politics behind us. The bad politics has gotten us to where we are right now as a nation.
Yeah, and Mr. Nguuh, because Daisy has talked about the need to not brush issues under the rug anymore. We need to have these difficult discussions as a Kenyan society. So in your view, and though Daisy has alluded to many of them, what are some of the issues that will dominate 2018? And then how do Kenyans refocus, especially coming out of a year where politicians have ran the show?
Well, I think before we get to even as it were, prophesy about what is going to happen in 2018. I think there's something Daisy has talked about the discussion. You see, the problem we have is that the two political divides are actually out just to, you know, to show who is who. And they're not thinking about the welfare of this nation. Let me say this. When we look at the NASA, or NRM, or whatever, the combination of that, I think all what they are talking about is we sit down and we discuss about electoral justice so that we go back to the polls. And I want to say, if they insist on that, we are not going to have discussions. If the government in the office right now believes that constitutionally they have been put legitimately there, and the Supreme Court has ruled about that, they're not going to sit down. They're going to use muscle and, you know, demonstrations and everything else, and we are going to get deeper and deeper into problems. If only we are going to just have electoral justice discussions for another election to take place. I don't see that happening. Now, on the other hand, if the Jubilee government thinks they can get along the NASA brigade to come and sit down to discuss the big four development, they are actually asking for something that is not, I mean, they're asking for these other guys to come and help them to succeed so that they may be seen like, it is not going to happen. But I think if we came around the table to discuss about what is the problem, and we know what the problems are. For instance, we had a whole discussion about TJRC. I mean, we discussed about where our problems are always coming. They are coming all the time. They are coming from these historical injustices and this and this. We scattered all that. Some people said if we implement it, there will be more chaos. Others said we implement it now the way it is. I mean, we have to sit around and say, what is ailing us at Kenyans? Mm-hmm. Where did we go wrong? How did we start this cycle? What can we do? And if we just sat down and said, we are going to discuss about, and let me go back again to the pet subject, equitable distribution of power and resources, where part of the country doesn't feel they are entitled to power, and you listen to, you know, the media stations, especially in the local languages out there. I mean, they're entitled to power. Then the others feel they are disenfranchised. You know, they will never get to power. They can predict, extrapolate. And they can extrapolate the next 20, 30, 50, 60, 100 years, and they will never come near to power. Now, if that is not addressed, definitely this cycle will never get finished. Now, about what I see happening, I see happening a movement of Kenyans. Daisy, myself, and others included, who will tell the politicians, yes, we want the big four to take place. Yes, we want electoral justice, but we must sit down and discuss as Kenyans the way forward from here. We don't want a repeat of where we have been before in 2007 and 2017. We don't want to remain always at attention. And I want to be part of that movement. Let me tell you something, I will be part of that movement, where we force the two sides to meet, not with conditions, not with minimum, you know, conditions that if we meet, we must discuss the big four, or we meet, we must discuss electoral justice to go to another election.
I wonder if it will be another Tahrir Square. It's like what we saw in Egypt.
I don't care. I don't care. If it means going to Uhuru Gardens or wherever, I think time has come for that movement to start.
Daisy, as we wrap up.
I do agree. I agree that the time has come for Kenyans to actually take their destiny into their own hands. It's clear that we are the ones that we've been waiting for because, you know, the politicians are always getting us into this situation. But the issue of electoral justice cannot be avoided in terms of the electorals, how we carry out our elections, the electoral system. And also when we talk about the equitable distribution of power, for me, it's not really about a certain tribe becoming president, you know, because devolution has dealt with those issues. Devolution has brought power and functions and resources to the people. You know, so it's really about how are we going to ensure that devolution works. In fact, I was having a discussion with one of my mentors, Professor Wanjiko Kabira, and she pointed out something, and I want to agree with her that devolution actually saved Kenya this time around during this electoral cycle from actually blowing up, because the people had that measure of control at the local level to be able to choose their leaders and all, so that the fight was not so concentrated at the top. Of course, there is that dissatisfaction with the way the electoral management body has carried out the elections, and that is something that must be interrogated. Honestly, the IEBC must not be allowed to get away with what they have done this year. What IEBC have done with the kind of resources that they have been given, they must not be allowed to get away with it. We need to interrogate our electoral process, we need to audit it, and we need to see penalties against people who would actually be used to manipulate the sovereign will of the people. But having said that, it is time for us to have an honest discussion. We've been skirting around the issues. We have, you know, some of those Agenda 4 items that still remain in abeyance. So it's not that Kenyans do not know what the problem is. We know what the problem is. And for the president to tell us that the time for politics is over, it's not. In fact, for them, it may be over for campaigning. But for us, it has begun, because now we must hold our leaders to account. We must address the issue of Kenya's indebtedness. You're talking about Big Four. This is development projects. But we must also address the issue of the debt that this country is currently in because of some of these development projects. We must interrogate Parliament's oversight role. How has the government, how has the executive managed to get Kenya into a situation of such high indebtedness without Parliament exercising the oversight that it needs to? So I agree that the people must bring the leaders to heel. We must demand accountability at every level. So for me, I mean, I even see the People's Assembly as an opportunity for Kenyans to actually actively engage in public participation, because, you know, it's a requirement, you know, and I know that there are those people who will feel, oh, you know, because it's being proposed by NASA, we can't get into it. This is our country. NASA are not foreigners. They are Kenyans like us. and it's a multi-party democracy. And if somebody, just the same way that Pastor here has talked about, you know, the NASA side perhaps not wanting to sit with the Jubilee side to help them deliver. One thing that we all have for us, as ourselves as Kenyans, is we have a responsibility to make a positive contribution to our country. If making that contribution means that we must gather together in a People's Assembly, because anything that involves a movement of people is the people coming together to discuss their issues, away from the politicians. We can call it what we want. Right now, it has been framed. This is called it's being called a People's Assembly. And I think that people need to get behind the idea of Kenyans actively working towards ensuring accountability from the leaders and holding them to account, bringing them to heel. You know, we cannot have perpetual politicking. Already, there are people who have positioned themselves. They have told us they are ruling us in 2022. I mean, we have not yet even finished. So already there is lineup for 2022. No, we must address the current issues, and I think it is time. Kenyans, and I want to say this to all Kenyans, Happy New Year, but 2018, it is time for us to get up and take our country back from the politicians who continually take us down the road to ruin. I don't think they even have the capacity to envision a better Kenya. They don't.
Okay.
They just don't have it.
Right, and you've spoken about time, very important element, which we have run out of.
No, we have not started yet.
I know,
Just
and
beginning.
we have a whole year coming ahead of us, so we can have these conversations. But thank you very much for joining us, John Wesley Nguuh and Daisy Amdany. On the same, and these are conversations we cannot exhaust on one sitting. We shall have more of this going forward. But